You said thinking? You said people gonna die? It's 1999, and the epic battle between good versus evil that you remember from your youth has been replaced with the morally greyest of all tactical geopolitical moves, the taxation of trade routes and the setting up of illegal blockades. But it's okay, Bill, because there were still lightsabers, the music was ace, and most importantly, you probably didn't have the internet to tell you that the movie you had just waited your entire life for was actually, well, a bit of a piece of shit. No, that would come in time via subsequent cinematic viewings and the long wait for the eventual VHS. Only then would you realize that what should have been the greatest cinematic moment of all time was actually the sci-fi equivalent of Godfather Part 3. Welcome to the Hey Guys podcast. I'm Liam, this is Rob. And in case you hadn't guessed it already, this week we're covering the much maligned Phantom Menace. And I apologize for putting you through this to a certain extent, because I suspect not being, well, I don't know actually, I'm not sure if you would hate it more as a Star Wars fan or less because you're not really a Star Wars fan, you know?
No, I've seen all the Star Wars, but I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. There's better sci-fi out there for me. My very first question...
You kind of said that like I asked my grandma, I've seen all the Star Wars.
My very first statement, is, if I upset you in any way, Liam, I apologise. Like, the fact that you made me sit through and watch this. Is this because I made you watch Nightbreed a couple of weeks ago? Because I had to watch this film in 3 sittings. Because if I watched it in one, I would have shot myself, all right, with my kid's Nerf gun, but I still would have shot myself. Because, mate, it's a struggle.
It's an odd film. I actually, maybe again, watching it with a more kind of critical eye, allowed me to kind of remove myself from my kind of Star Wars fandom, because I am a big Star Wars fan. There's no two ways about it. And growing up, this was a massive deal. And this is the reason I've picked it largely. And watching it again, I probably enjoyed it the most this time since the first time I watched it. And I know that sounds weird, but you've got to remember going in watching this for the first time, it was like, so again, 1999, the hype was like out of this world. Like, whatever you might say about this movie, it has one of the greatest trailers of all time, like flat out.
Oh, the trailer's great. You know, the trailers,
yeah, because the fact of the matter is there's good stuff in this film, and this hand cherry picks all the actual good stuff and leaves out a lot of the, a lot of the Jar Jar, a lot of the taxation of trade routes.
You're seeing good stuff. I pressed play and I found myself going about 4 or 5 times. Fuck you, Jar Jar. Just fuck you, Jar Jar. The dude is annoying as shit, honestly.
He has a reputation for being the worst thing in Star Wars ever. And I'm not going to lie, returning to it, I actually found him worse than ever. Like, as much as, because I was taking the positives out of the film, I was almost like blocking out Jar Jar because he is so bad. I know some people make the arguments. And again, just to be clear, one of the other reasons I picked this film, is because it's getting a bit of a renaissance, certainly the original trilogy, because you've got to remember the people who grew up watching this, the people this was arguably aimed towards, kids who were watching this when they were 6 or 7 who loved Jar Jar, they're in their late 20s now and they're having that impact, and that's why you're seeing it and stuff like The Mandalorian and Boba Fett, Book of Boba Fett and stuff like that. But I don't buy into this idea that Jar Jar Binks is just that generation's Ewoks. Because, yeah, sure, I loved the Ewoks growing up, despite the fact that they are slightly shit. But the thing is with the Ewoks, one, they're still kind of cute because they're just teddy bears. But they're not an absolute essential part of the plot. They're not constantly talking. Jar Jar Binks is absolutely carpet bombed through this entire movie. And I just do not buy into the idea that the Ewoks are anywhere as nearly as annoying as Jar Jar Binks.
Do you think George Lucas intended it as well? Because there are hints, isn't there, to the racial tendencies of Jar Jar. Like what they've said before, like the droopy ears are meant to resemble dreadlocks, and he's speaking in like an Afro-Caribbean
tone. I've heard arguments about that. Yeah. There's a few things that point towards that. There's like the trade federation, and some people suggesting that they're Asian businessmen kind of stereotypes and stuff.
I've only seen this film once before. Now I understand why I never went back and rewatched it. Rewatching it again, and it's just I hear it more from Jar Jar this time, and you can't escape it. You can't escape that George Lucas is trying to, I don't know, like you said, the Trade Federation, like Asian stereotypes and things like that. He's shoehorning things into it, and we're going to get into a lot of like the political satire that it was going with as well, and the fact that for some reason you had E.T., who I never noticed before, but the E.T.
Oh yeah, they're at the Senate, aren't they? But, which is just a nod. That's fair.
Yeah, I know. I've never seen that one before. You can't escape it with Jar Jar. And do you know what? Right, he's worse than Jake Lloyd. And no offense to Jake Lloyd. Jake Lloyd 100%. Is a child actor, and so you gotta give him a bit of a leeway. But my God, Jake Lloyd's terrible in this as well.
A lot of people are terrible in it. It is like the two standouts. Like Jar Jar is off on his own little planet. He is, as I said, he was even more annoying than I remembered. And going back to watching it, I really wanted to give Jake Lloyd the benefit of the doubt. Remove yourself from the expectations, everything. Yeah. This is a kid. But you've got to think there must have been a global search for the actor or the child actor to play Anakin. And I still find it amazing that they ended up with Jake Lloyd. And I appreciate he was always kind of ice skating uphill, as it were, because you only have to look at what happened in Anakin in the subsequent films. But more specifically, you've got some very talented actors in this film giving very terrible performances. Like, make no mistake, Ewan McGregor, who does grow into the role in the subsequent sequels, is not good in this film. He's flat out not good. And again, I think a big part of it is that combination of a lot of actors not being accustomed to green screen back in 1999. But Natalie Portman, another great actress, terrible in this film for large parts. And the only ones who really come out smelling of roses are the two people who get killed off, two of the best characters. Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson, certainly adds a bit of gravitas. Darth Maul, who doesn't act much, but is very cool. The one person who I do think stands up more than anyone is Ian McDermott. And going back and watching this film, I think how good his performance is kind of has gone under the radar because of how bad other people are, if you see what I mean. Like, that was always the emphasis. And I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, because I hear a lot of people say that, oh, you don't get it, he was trying to make a kid's film. Which, if you're looking at the Jar Jar Binks stuff, it's not just the accent. If we remove, whatever we might think about the racial undertones and stuff, it's super slapstick. It's mega broad comedy. But it also sits alongside a surprisingly, and I actually kind of warmed to this part of the film, an in-depth look at the geopolitical aspects of Ian McDermott's rise to power. I know it might be dry, but in 2022 in particular, in light of Trump and Putin, I'm like, my God, they are showing you in this film in surprising detail how a despot or a potential kind of megalomaniac could come into power in a largely democratic galaxy. And I was just like, okay, sure, all that stuff about trade routes and blockades is boring, but you look at the world around you now, and that's how it starts. This kind of political intrigue. It doesn't start with a bang. The Nazis just don't show up as the Nazis. They come in through the back door with these sneaky political moves, and that's how you end up getting the Emperor. And I actually thought that side of the film was surprisingly interesting, going back to it. But that might just be me, I'll admit.
All right, take a breath. Jesus Christ.
I know. You have to be passionate when you're talking in defense of Phantom Menace, because Jesus Christ, you don't get many opportunities.
Right. You've said a lot in that sentence then, in that diatribe. I need to go back and address a couple of things. The first thing being, Darth Maul, until this rewatching, did not know he was voiced by Peter Serafinowicz. Professor Sevenitz. Yes, that's the one, yeah. He was in,
I can't say it. I literally can't say it.
He was in Coupling, wasn't he? And he was.
I remember him from Spaced and stuff like that. He does a lot of voice work.
He's the Tick now.
Yes,
he was the Tick, yeah. So I didn't know that. Ray Stevenson, I've always been a fan of his martial arts. I'm a big B-movie martial arts fan.
Ray Park, you mean?
Ray Park, sorry, not Ray Stevenson.
Yeah.
Ray Park. I say I'm a big martial arts fan. I got his name wrong. Ray Park.
It's quite all right.
But what you said then was interesting, was people are saying he was trying to make a kid's film. Nobody is trying to make a kid's film by shoehorning in, as you just said for the last 5 minutes, nothing but political... Well, nothing but politics, sorry, not political, politics.
Well, that's what I mean. It's weird.
You've got the Senate. You've got all these people arguing. You've got Ian. What did you say his name was? Ian
McDermott.
Ian McDermott. Him backhanding his way into power. And poor Malcolm McDowell. Like, did he just think, oh, it's a Star Wars film. I get to do it, so I'm just going to be in there.
Maybe. I mean, he doesn't get much. But it's arguably an important role in its own strange way. But no, I totally agree. when people kind of come to this movie's defense and say, oh, well, it's a kid's film, it's not for you, it's for kids. I was like, no, this is a film where it's almost like he couldn't decide which kind of film he wanted to make. And like I said, on the one side, he's arguably made, I know it comes at the expense of narrative propulsion, but an in-depth look at how the Emperor, when people were sold this film, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be about Anakin's rise to being Darth Vader. The trilogy kind of is, but that doesn't start until the second film. This film is all about how the Emperor Palpatine came into power. And I know he's not quite there yet, but it's very much the start. It's not really the start of Anakin's journey to the dark side. It's very much the start of Emperor Palpatine's journey to becoming the Emperor. And of course, it's even in the name, the whole name, which was kind of ridiculed back in the day, the Phantom Menace. It's such a phantom that we all just assumed he was talking about Anakin. It's very much about Ian McDiarmid's character as Senator Palpatine.
You've said Anakin as well. That's creepy as shit as well. The fact that Anakin becomes Luke Skywalker's father, so that he hooks up with
Padme.
Amidala. So you're seeing these two interact on screen, you're thinking, this is creepy as shit. But sooner or later, they're going to end up fucking. No two ways about it. That's what's creepy.
The whole film, I mean, and again, this was at a time when, this really did, despite, whatever you might think about the movie itself, this really did popularize the concept of prequels. That had never been done. And it wasn't because they were just oh, let's do a prequel. This all came back to the fact that George Lucas always had that larger arc in mind. New Hope was episode 4, from very early.
He's always said that this was the middle of his story.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, but it's just strange that considering the film that we were watching, and you got to remember the film that we were all expecting in 1999. We're like, oh, we're going to see Anakin's descent to the dark side. You don't get any hint of that in this movie whatsoever. Of course, it comes rather clumsily via Hayden Christensen, in Attack of the Clones, which I actually think is a worse movie. We'll get to that in Legacy. But yeah, it's, as I said, in so many respects, despite the fact that I think there's some really good stuff in this film, it's an absolute mess. And as I said, to stress it, the reason that this was so important for so many people, especially my age, was that back in 1999, it's easy for people now, most people have their generational thing, don't they? You're like, oh, they had Harry Potter growing up. Or the generation before us, obviously, they actually had Star Wars growing up.
Yeah.
And then there was Harry Potter. Then there was Lord of the Rings. Now there's Marvel. We as kids of the mid to late 80s, we actually didn't have anything.
No, because I'm trying to think now what ours would have been growing up. And
it was Star Wars, but only because we got the VHSs 7 years after it was released. We didn't have that cultural thing, unless I'm misremembering.
Yeah, there's nothing that, a cult phenomenon, Jesus Christ, chew my words, that for us growing up, for us to sink our teeth into. Ours wasn't. Like you said, ours is previous Star Wars, or as we go on now, you get, as you've already said, Harry Potter, which we missed the boat on, wasn't it? But that's the thing. I don't know whether I just do it then because everyone else is into it. I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I'm not a huge Potter fan. A couple of weeks ago, you said that you watched Nightbreed in between two of the greatest films ever, one of them being Return of the King. Mm-hmm. I didn't say it then, but I think Return of the King is terrible. Anyway, I'm not a huge fan of any of those. So,
but again, we were grown up by then. Whether it be Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, we were adults by the time they came out.
I'm just not a huge fan of, which is weird because I love fantasy. But it's got to be, I guess it's got to be cheesy fan, because Willow, I think, is one of the best films I've watched. Do you know what I mean?
Willow's a great thing. And as you say, we all have different tastes and different things to pick out. But even if you weren't a Harry Potter fan or you weren't Lord of the Rings, there's no argument with the fact that that was a cultural, massive...
Absolutely.
But we didn't have anything which had that level of cultural impact in the same way. As I said, it was literally Star Wars had that level of cultural impact between 77 and 82. And then there was nothing on that scale. There were individual films, but there was nothing that had that level of impact up until literally Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, which came out kind of around the same time towards the tail end of the 90s, going into the early 2000s. And then since then, geek culture has kind of grown in prominence and it's been pretty relentless since then. So it was none of us were around. I mean, as I said, Return of the Jedi was released the year I was born. So we had grown up watching these movies on VHSs, on TV for years kind of thing. And it's easy to forget how big of a deal it was when they re-released the original trilogy in cinema in 1997. And obviously, again, some of the changes that they made, people would argue, they were poor. They've made the films, they've made the films worse in many respects. But again, without the internet, you had no one to tell us. And at 15 years old at the time, I was just over the moon to see the films on the big screen for the first time. And it totally reignited my passion and a lot of other people's passions for Star Wars. So again, it just led into this whole idea that expectations for this film were sky high. And I, like so many other people, went to the cinema and convinced myself that it wasn't that bad. If you'd asked me as I came out of the cinema, and I remember when I went to see it, I saw it in the Odeon on Queen Street in Cardiff in 1999. I was like, oh, that was pretty good. And, like I said, you didn't have the internet to tell you're an idiot, that's a piece of shit. And it was only the second viewing months later, I was like,
but you should have told yourself.
This film's rubbish.
You should have told yourself, no, it was a piece of shit. Not the internet. You should have.
No, I know I should have, but come on, man. You must have been blinded by wanting to love something so much. I mean, I've done it since
Die Hard 4.
Maybe not to this level. What's that?
Die Hard 4.
Die Hard 4, yeah. Where you come out of and dude, I did the same thing again with Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't learn my lesson. I came out of Attack of the Clones. I was like, yeah, they did everything we wanted them to do for this truly superior sequel. And then I watched it a second time. I was like, what the fuck? I've been tricked again. This is even worse.
This is how much of a glutton for punishment I am. I mean, spoiler alert, it's going to come to no surprise what my feelings or what my scores or recommendations at the end of this film are going to be. But for some reason now, I want to finish this trilogy. So at some point, I'm going to have to try and convince myself to watch Attack of the Clones and the third one.
The Revenge of the Sith. That's actually that film has got some of the quintessentially, Lucas style clunky dialogue as well. But I stand by the fact that Revenge of the Sith is a good film. I legitimately think it's a good film and a good send off to the original trilogy. Your
42nd birthday, that I'll let you pick another Star Wars film then, like 2 years down the line.
That's fair enough. But I mean, the one thing I'll say about this film, and we'll get to some of the actual set pieces and the stuff that really works, and obviously some of the stuff that doesn't. But the one thing that this movie and the subsequent trilogy has, which say the new films don't, is that it's a singular vision. And you feel that through every aspect of this film. Whatever you might say about the pacing and the characters, right from beginning to end, so episode 1 to episode 3, is totally a singular and a consistent vision. And it's the reason, like, don't get me wrong, the most recent trilogy of films are better made films, but I'm not sure if it's a better trilogy because it's a bit of a mess. Whereas this, you can really tell that despite the quality, and a lot of it comes down to Lucas's somewhat offhanded kind of documentary style of direction, certainly with his actors, where, he's just kind of like, well, off to the races, you just do what you want, and it ends up with a somewhat uneven performance across the board. But because it's such a consistent universe, and he's, again, created so many interesting parts to fit inside it, what is created is a very elaborate extended universe. There's a reason that there's a lot of good stuff associated with the original trilogy.
Absolutely. The Mandalorian is fantastic. Rogue One, I think, is an absolutely fantastic film.
I love that film. Yeah,
I so enjoy that film. Joe, all right, and I'm a supporter of Solo.
Me too.
I really enjoy Solo. I would like
that film struggled by basically just being decent.
I would like to see what the two guys, what their vision was. Was it Lloyd and Miller?
Lloyd and Miller, yeah.
I would like to see what their vision was before it was like 90% recut. But and I appreciate Lucas's vision. Lucas's vision is, I mean, it's captured the imagination of millions. Do you know what I mean? People love it. But what I find really difficult is it took him 20 years from beginning Star Wars to come to the Phantom Menace to decide what the Force was going to be. And he decided that the Force is how much chlorine is in your body. I'm taking a piss. I know it's midi-chlorians, but it's strange. It's awful. Like
it's bad. And the weirdest thing going back to it is that how much it clashes up against the other aspect of the theory of the one, or the kind of the legend of the one. Because on the one hand, and again, the idea of kind of two concepts clashing.
The one who brings balance to the Force. Do they ever answer?
Well, it is supposed to be. No, it is just supposed to be Anakin kind of thing. But you have on one side the very scientific concept of the midichlorians. But on the other side, you've got Anakin's mother not having, she said, basically the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
So you've got like the religious kind of
thing. Like,
yeah, and there's no way, I don't buy it. You saw the way she was looking at Big Liam. She was keen to get down with him immediately. So
you call yourself Big Liam, by the way.
Big Liam, not me, Big Liam, other Big Liam. But anyway, it's so odd that you have those two concepts of the midichlorians just totally clashing against the idea that she had an Immaculate Conception of Anakin. So again, considering you had so long to write it, there's so many tonal inconsistencies in this film, many of which kind of make for, I'm not sure if there's another Star Wars film with such highs and lows. I really don't think there is, because the lows, we've already mentioned some of them, the performances, the acting, Jake Lloyd, obviously Jar Jar Binks. But the highs of the pod race and the lightsaber battle at the end in particular are I think they are two of the best set pieces of the entire saga.
Well, that's what I wanted to, because I've spent now nearly 15, 20 minutes kind of slagging this film off.
Which is fair enough.
That's not going to end. But there are things that I really enjoyed. And yes, the pod race was good. I'm still a bit against that. I don't think that fight at the end was the best. It probably was to begin with, but we've seen better sword fights. But again, compared to what the sword fights were for the original trilogy, or the lightsaber fights, somebody's going to kill me because I'm seeing sword fights. But you know what I thought really looked stunning?
What's that?
Jar Jar Binks' underwater village. Like when they went underwater, what's it called, sorry?
Like the Gungan Empire kind of thing.
The Gungan. When they went
it's literally called Gungan City.
And it's they're all in the bubbles and so I thought for 1999 for that to be an underwater city, it looked fantastic. It looked
that is the other thing with this film is I was amazed how much, if you get really up close with some of the characters, Jar Jar in particular and maybe Boss Nass, you can see this this is Boss Nass, played by Brian Blessed.
Was he the
Yusin Heeson?
Like the leader of the
Yeah, I just wanted to do this the face shake thing. But other than like extreme close-ups on those characters where you're like, okay, it's kind of aged a little bit. For the most part, this film looks unbelievable for a film which is 23 years old. And a big part of that, beyond the fact that the special effects really hold up, is whatever you might think of Lucas as a director, this really is him at his imaginative world-building best. Like, you look at Coruscant, Naboo, which is just kind of space Venice.
Right, you need to help me out. You're saying names now. Coruscant is what?
Coruscant is the kind of capital city where it's basically just one giant city planet. Where they go.
So when you had all the high rises and So Gungan City is obviously underwater. Naboo is Princess Amidala's homeworld. Yeah,
and you've got so many kind of great nods to classics. 50s sci-fi, like the ship design, I think is much more 50s inspired than the early films.
Did you see the Enterprise?
The what, sorry?
The Enterprise was in there.
No, I never noticed that. Is it in it?
Yeah, I saw it and I looked it up and I put it down in fact. I can't remember exactly where it was in the film, but the Enterprise flew past.
Jesus Christ. I knew about E.T. and someone said once that Indiana Jones is supposedly in the crowd at the pod race, which I never spotted. But I didn't know about the Enterprise. But yeah, the design is amazing. The droider cars, I think they're fantastic. But yeah, it's just a shame that he kind of gets in front of himself. But I think it's actually to be celebrated, the fact that, he's coming from Star Wars and everyone's just like, I just want more Star Wars. He threw everything out there. Obviously, they had Jedi. You've got like some of the kind of core tropes and, visual kind of emblems of the original trilogy. But for the most part, it's like X-Wings, TIE fighters, they're all gone.
Yeah.
Like he from a visual standpoint, he's going in a completely different direction. And again, I think it's one of those things that kind of gets lost amidst the things that really don't work in this film, which obviously we've listed to one extent or another.
Why was the female gremlin from Gremlins 2 in the Jedi Council, by the way?
Oh, yeah. That the kind of the other Yoda, the one with the hair.
Yeah, like a female Yoda, like from my Yoda. From my just ever passing Star Wars knowledge, I was always under the impression that before Baby Yoda came out, Grogu, I think his name is, before he came, there was only Yoda. I'm watching this film and there's like female Yoda. Like
no, they are a race, I think. So there are other Yodas. One thing you may not have, I guess, remembered or noticed is the Yoda you'll probably see. I assume you watch this on Disney Plus, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Yoda looks how you remember Yoda looking. But if you go back and watch the original trailer or original, say, VHS or DVD of Phantom Menace, the Yoda in that film is actually a puppet, and he's terrible. Like I don't like they tried to make him look a little bit younger, and instead he just looks weird as shit. So they got rid of him, and it's one of the few things I think they changed it for the 3D re-release about I don't know what it would have been 8, 9, 10 years ago, but it was for the best because the original Yoda in this film was rough. I
know they're a race. Obviously, they're a race. He exists, but if you look at the Mandalorian, they didn't know what Baby Yoda was. They just call it the child, but they don't know what race it is, where he comes from, anything like that. So Yoda's race is a mystery. But all of a sudden, they like, and again, it looks like the female Gremlin from Gremlins 2, who's trying to hook up with Robert Picardo at the end of that film. Or Yoda in drag. It depends on what weekend it is, but.
I see. It's weird. I never took it even as a girl. I just took it as a younger. Again, I'm a big Star Wars fan, but I don't know what the race is called. But a younger Yoda, I suppose. But I didn't even think of it as necessarily being a girl Yoda. But now that you've said the female weird kind of gremlin from Gremlins 2: A New Batch, I'm like, well, that's all I'll see for the rest of my life now. Although realistically, I shouldn't be watching this film that many more times.
If you're going to be watching it for this film is to torture somebody. Like I think I've upset you. I think I've physically upset you somehow or another for you to make me watch this film.
No, all right. And we need to get to the good stuff because, again, like I quite like the introduction to the Jedi at the start, although they do have Jedi powers which are never seen again. Like, well, their ability to hold their breath for a really long time, whatever. But their super speed when the droider cars show up, when they're trying to get into the
did they hold their breath for a long time, or did they use those?
No, this is right. I know what you mean. You're talking about when they swim down to Gungan.
Yeah, but they hold their breath when they gasp. But I thought I saw them put those rebreathers in.
They did. When they go into water, they use the breathers.
No, but I thought they put them in at the beginning.
Well, I wasn't sure. I thought they just like held their breath. But whatever. The one I'm really getting to is like the fact that they're like, okay, let's get out of here, and they just sprint off at like super speed.
Yeah. What was that?
Yeah, it doesn't happen again for the entire saga. It's just in that singular moment.
Or, like, again, does chlorine in your body help you survive really tall falls? Because when they escape through the air ducts... and they drop down then into the cargo bay, that is a big drop.
Yeah, I think we can kind of pass that off as a general Jedi power. You see them drop pretty far in other films. Like, that's not unheard of. But certainly the super speed thing, you never see again. But whatever. I mean, the fact of the matter is after that, it probably takes too long for us to get to another action set piece. But when we do, I know you appear to be not as fussed as I am, certainly, but I think the pod race is an unbelievable piece of cinema. Not only does it still totally stand the test of time from a visual perspective, but because I think the really interesting thing about it is that this isn't a montage. You're not seeing clips of a race. The race is 3 laps long. You see the entire race, the build-up.
It feels like a video game. Even the laps, the fact they're doing laps, it feels like a video game. Because
to me, it feels like qualifying for Formula One. It literally feels like in the middle of the film, they stopped the film and we're like, we're going to have a sporting event in the middle of this film, and it's not going to be cut to any other drama going on. There's not going to be any characterization. Just for a solid 20 minutes, they just say we're going to have a race. And one of the things I noticed this time is that they even until the very end of the race, they even remove all traces of the score. Like the film is in that section is completely reliant upon some of the best audio design in the entire film. The sound of those machines is spectacular.
When they set off as well and they're racing, and because I'm in my head it looks like a video game anyway, and you see a bunch of people with a no entry sign and it looks like a ramp going up, and they just go past it, and I thought, I thought they would have gone over that ramp, and then it turns out they've done a loop and it's a lap. Just like, because at first I didn't know it was 3 laps. I thought it was just a race. And when I found out that, I said, well, if they don't go up that, like for the last time, like because in my head I'm thinking video game style, that's a shortcut. That's the shortcut. And obviously Anakin, well, he gets knocked onto it, but
he still takes it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like you say, and I mean, they literally turned it into a video game in Pod Race. So one of the better video games, and we'll get to the video game section at the end, because there were a lot of video games based on this film. But I just can't think of another movie that has something quite like the Pod Race just plonked in the middle of it. And you can see that this was obviously a big part of Lucas's vision, because there's a 20-minute spell at the start, which just feels like an excuse to get to the pod race. They're just like, we need to get them in a position where I can have this pod race. And he just, once he gets there, he abandons the narrative, abandons the rest of the film. It's just like, oh, we're going to pod race like a motherfucker right now. And I was just like, dude, this could have been made yesterday. I think it looks and sounds that good. And as I said, I think it is amongst easily the best set pieces in the entire saga.
It looks great. It looks great. You feel the tension of it. It's done so well. The design of the other pod racers is all really good.
Very video game, like you said.
It looks absolutely great. What I do question is, I don't know his name. I'm going to call him Boba, the main pod racer, the one everyone needs to be.
Sebulba.
Okay, I was close.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, it's not bad.
So, I mean, he walks on his hands and he uses his feet as hands, which is really strange.
I think he's a great character.
But he damages a bit of Anakin's pod. Like, he knows all about pods. He's the best pod racer in the world. But apparently that thing he damages isn't significant enough to do any damage.
Well, it does it for a bit. I think he's under the impression that this is going to be enough to take him out of the race. But I think that the story they're telling is that he's such a good mechanic that even in the heat of a race, he can fix his own ship. Like, I think they're trying to suggest that for anyone else, that would be the end of their race.
Fix his own ship. All that kid did was flick some buttons up and down. Anyone does that.
I know. I mean, the bit when it kind of comes loose and he has like the magnet to pull it back, I thought that was all pretty cool. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's a bit ridiculous. But I thought Sebulba was a great character. I actually really love Watto. Like, because there are some terrible characters in this.
Flying bug thing.
Oh, I think he's great. I'm a Tidarian. Mind tricks don't work on me. Only money. I was like, I love this guy.
I just so happen to have a chance cube. You mean a dice, dude? You mean you mean a dice
clearly
that
loaded.
You painted red and blue?
Yeah, well, it's clearly a loaded dice, but he doesn't. At that point, I think he should figure out that he's up against a Jedi, considering he clearly tried to do a Jedi mind trick.
And he said Jedi mind tricks don't work on me, but okay, I appreciate that you didn't do any Jedi tricks on that
dice. It's this seems completely reasonable. It's like, dude, you're setting yourself up for a fall here, and he doesn't lose everything. But I mean, this all kind of then, although there is the underrated battle between then. Darth Maul and Qui-Gon down on Tatooine, like as they're about to leave, and he shows up. I was like, that's a pretty cool precursor to like the subsequent fight.
This is a nice little hint as well, because I can imagine. I never watched this in the cinema. I was a Star Wars fan. I wasn't going to the cinema to watch this, but I can imagine the pop it kind of gets when he's fighting. Darth Maul's fighting Qui-Gon, single saber. But the hilt that he's got is massive, and you're wondering why he's got such a massive hilt. And then the second time they face off, he turns it into a bow staff. Like, I can imagine the pop in the cinema for that being.
I mean, the thing is, again, though, I think for a lot of people, the pop didn't come in the cinema. It came in the trailer, and that was one of the big things in the trailer. You've got to remember, the music kicks in, he puts it on his side, and it's a double-ended lightsaber, and everyone just loses their shit. And again, this is a trilogy coming off the back of Darth Vader, one of the most iconic movie villains of all time. And while I don't think Darth Maul's up there, it's like they did a pretty good job of replacing him. Like, Darth Maul, like, certainly visually is immediately iconic. And the way he jumps in, has that fight scene, and how they're setting up for their proper like battle at the end. And I appreciate that there might be more kind of technically impressive fight scenes in the subsequent films. But you've got to remember, again, in 1999, when that door opens, he spins it round. It's a double-edged lightsaber. But not only that, Duel of the Fates kicks in, which I think is one of the finest scores of cinema history. Like, when the music kicks in, the lightsaber goes out the side. I was just like, okay, this is the film I came to see. And in fairness to them, it doesn't all work. But you do have that kind of big, usually you have like a three-way kind of finale where you've got the space battle, the lightsaber battle, and then, the grand battle. This actually has 4 parts to it. There's the Battle of Naboo between the droid army and the Gungans. There's the lightsaber battle, obviously. There's the starfighter battle to take out the droid control ship. But then there's also Princess Amidala's battle to take out the Viceroy. So there's like 4 things going on at once. And it should be fantastic, but you have to put up with fucking Jar Jar Binks' hijinks on one side and Jake Lloyd being an absolute tool in the other.
I've got my head in my hands now because you mentioned that fucking ship battle. Like, he's in the ship. He presses a button, it takes off to space, right?
I can go with that. No, I forced myself, but okay, we'll allow it.
All right, but autopilot is taking him not just to the ship, but to the hangar bay, where all the other pilots have clearly said, we can't get close enough. Well, if you can't get close enough, but he is, how about you just turn your fucking autopilot on? Because it's working for this kid.
I think autopilot kind of just takes him up into space towards the battle, because then he's kind of like, he's doing flips and stuff. So he has control. No. The problem I have is that everything he does from that point on is a complete accident. He accidentally ends up inside the ship. He accidentally fires rockets at the one thing that, you know, that needs to be blown up. Like, none of it, he's not even in there. He's like, well, I'm in here, I'll blow this up. He's just pressing buttons. It's like, oh, well, that's worked out absolutely perfectly, and I'm the hero of the day. And like I said, when that's being cut alongside Jar Jar Binks, totally undermining what should have been a really cool battle between the Gungans and the droid army. And I'm like, I'm trying to enjoy this film because the other part of it, the lightsaber battle, is so good, even though it doesn't make any sense. Why are those force fields there other than for dramatic effect? There's no fucking reason.
Like, it's weird. What is it? It's Galaxy Quest, where they've got to go down to the heart of the ship to stop it. And all of a sudden, you've got these grinders and gears. And why is this in the show? It's literally for dramatic. That's exactly how I thought.
That's the only reason.
And Galaxy Quest is the same year, isn't it? Galaxy Quest.
It is the same year, yeah. So it's...
My question, though, Darth Maul. Solo is set after this, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. But Darth Maul died.
Well, no, that's the thing, though. Classic Star Wars thing. He gets cut in half, and he falls down one of Star Wars' many magical endless holes. Like, they're in every film. Every Star Wars film has just an endless pit. And he falls down the endless pit, and of course, you don't see him die. And when he shows up in, I'm not sure if you noticed it in Solo, because, again, you don't have that connection to this film, he's got metal legs. So he's had... Yeah, in Solo, and that's not just a take from the Phantom Menace, because we mentioned it earlier. Some of the successful offshoots from the original trilogy. One of them is the great animated Clone Wars.
The Clone Wars animated show.
Yeah. And Darth Maul is in that with metal legs, so that is actually a nod to his kind of character progression in the Clone Wars TV shows. And they're actually saying that he's likely to show up in the new Obi-Wan series on Disney Plus, which I'm very much looking forward to, because again, as bad as Ewan McGregor is in this film, by the third film in particular, he's really it took him a few films, but he's really good in Revenge of the Sith. I'm just going to keep reminding you, Revenge of the Sith is actually really fucking good.
Because I had to watch, I had to read up on it. When I was watching The Mandalorian, and Rosario Dawson, who I absolutely adore, by the way, showed up as Ahsoka. I had to figure out who Ahsoka was. And
she's
especially
from the animated show
after the book of Mandalorian, because it wasn't the book of Boba Fett after a while.
It really wasn't.
After that book of Mandalorian episode where she says to Luke, "You're just like your father," I had to figure out what was going on. And it turns out in that Clone Wars TV show, he gets his own apprentice, and it's a young Ahsoka.
Ashoka, yeah. So that is his apprentice. He was formerly her Jedi master, as it were, kind of thing. So all that stuff is fitting together, and that is one of the things. It's easy to forget because a lot of this film didn't work. But what it did do is establish a new universe, as it were, for them to work from. And the films, as I said, I actually think Attack of the Clones is even worse. Revenge of the Sith, I love, but not everyone's cup of tea. But there's been so many offshoots because, if nothing else, and it's a low bar, admittedly, but unlike the recent sequels, recent trilogy, it's consistent. There's so much to work from in terms of lore, in terms of visuals. Now? Yeah. Well, like you say, you see it with The Mandalorian, with all these things. So much of it is actually coming from that original trilogy. And I think people are not reassessing it because, as we said, it's still not a good film. As I said, there's good stuff in it. But I think as a trilogy, there's a lot you can actually take from it, and a lot that has been taken from it. So I think even though it's not a great film, I think it's a really important film. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to re-review it, as it were, now.
You could take a lot from it, but we're watching The Phantom Menace, and you have sold the fact that Revenge of the Sith is great on a Phantom Menace podcast.
Very good. I think it's really good. I think there's some really great stuff.
We're watching this film now, but we're watching this film to get to the third film. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. To me, this film still is, this film is a mess to me.
It is a bit of a mess. And honestly, if you rewatch it, I'll be really interested to hear what you think of Attack of the Clones in particular, because that's one where I think people in the moment were like, oh, he's given us everything we wanted. And it was only again afterwards you realize, oh no, it's still not very good. And I think people were blinded by the big battles and Yoda having a lightsaber
I can't remember Attack of the Clones. So Tamir Morrison, who is a fantastic actor, is Boba Fett.
Yeah, well, yeah, but he's Jango Fett initially. From the book of Boba Fett, Tamir Morrison is Boba Fett. Yeah.
But if I remember right, Boba Fett was the son of Jango, and Jango. Yeah, well,
the thing is,
Jango
you see
was
that in
the basis of the clones. So in in Attack of the Clones, are they all Tamir Morrison then?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then that's why they've gone back and amend things. So theoretically, like all the stormtroopers are all Tamir Morrison. They're all the same guy. They're all clones, basically. Okay. And that comes from that film. And again, that idea that as much as I think the second film isn't particularly I think it's actually a little bit worse than Phantom Menace. Some really interesting concepts and important stuff for the wider universe come from those films. But yeah, I'm still thinking about the goddamn force fields. I'm just like, why were they in there? Jesus Christ. And it was the same. Remember we were talking last week when we did the Serenity podcast about sci-fi tropes and how much they hate handrails. This film is awash with them. Like the last battle is just walkways without handrails.
They hated handrails. It's like they run out of they run out of budget for handrails. Yeah. So if you fall, you're on your... But again, you've already said it. Apparently, Star Wars has... All their holes are just magic portals that end up somewhere else. So they don't have to put handrails in, because if you fall, you're fine. You'll just end up somewhere else. Maybe you'll lose a leg. Maybe you'll lose an arm, but you'll be fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, they literally showed you how it could work, I guess, in Empire Strikes Back. Like Luke, again, goes out on a walkway. There are no handrails. He decides to jump because, obviously, he's had some bad news. He's lost a hand. But you see what happens after. It looks like, well, surely he's going to die. He's just jumped off into a bottomless pit. But he gets sucked off into another hole somewhere. Jesus, this all sounds very rude. And ends up surviving. So, the one thing I would have said was that, well, at least... Emperor Palpatine definitely died because he fell down a hole and then the Death Star blew up. But he fucking came back. The only one who fell down the hole and actually died was Han Solo. He's the only one. Unbelievable.
He fell down a hole. Oh, and that walkway actually had handrails on it, didn't it?
I don't think it did have handrails.
You know?
No, they walked out and met in the middle, and as soon as that scene in The Force Awakens, I was just like, oh, Han Solo's dead. Because there are no handrails, there's no reason for them to be on that walkway other than for one of them to fucking fall. That's the only reason.
Any sci-fi film I ever watch, I'm going to see if they put handrails in.
Oh, dude, it never happens. There's never handrails. It's ridiculous. But one thing
we might want to move on at some point, because we've had a lot to say about...
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say is, again, I mentioned the score from John Williams to one extent, and certainly Duel of the Fates as being one of the real key things to come from this film. You know, everyone remembers Duel of the Fates. They use it at football stadiums all the time. But I actually love the music at the end when they're back on Naboo. And this film's got a really weird end because it's really dark because you know Anakin's going to become Vader. You know Palpatine's already got his kind of, foot in the door in terms of getting into power. But then you have the big celebration on Naboo where they're handing over the globe of peace. And I love the celebrations and the music. I thought that was fantastic. But yes, we do need to move on. This is going to be interesting.
I do owe apologies because I said Malcolm McDowell was Ian McDermott.
Oh, he was the head of the Senate, wasn't he?
But he wasn't Malcolm McDowell. It was Terence Stamp.
It was Terence Stamp.
Yeah. So I owe apologies.
I was like, God, was it Malcolm McDowell? They do look quite similar, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I owe apologies.
He was playing
Malcolm McDowell.
What's his name? Chancellor Valorum. Because Padme has to vote for no confidence in Chancellor Valorum's powers, with that weird kind of flat tone she does.
That was fucking Keira Knightley.
And do you know Keira Knightley, obviously, she plays a part in this film. Do you know who one of her other handmaidens was? And I had no idea. Sofia Coppola. God Godfather Part 3 and this. She loves to ruin fucking sagas. Unbelievable. But she did make Lost in Translation, so we'll let her off. But yeah, we could talk about, well, I could certainly talk about this movie all day, but we need to move on. So love and hate. This is going to be an interesting one. Sir, can you find 3 things you love about this movie?
I'll go first, am I?
Oh yeah, I'm going to put the pressure on you because you know I'll find plenty of things I love about this film. But,
right. The visuals. I mean, it's an easy one, but the visuals are great. They are fantastic. Really are. The choreography of the start of the lightsaber battles. Like I said, it wasn't the best compared to what we see now, but it's still great if you look at it at the last one. So the choreo, and I'll give Ray Park his due because I think Ray Park is fantastic. Anyway, as a martial artist, so the choreography for that and the pod race.
The pod race. That's fair. Well, I mean, that kind of leans straight into mine. Number one, I've got the pod race with the bullets. I think it was better than ever, and I think it's a completely unique set piece for this kind of movie. I don't think there's anything else like it, even, 23 years later. The final lightsaber battle, which to my mind, I still think actually is the best one, but I understand there are a lot of good ones in the subsequent films, but I think it was just the impact of it at the time.
Yeah.
I actually really like, despite the fact that, again, that it kind of drives the narrative pace, absolutely into the ground. I actually quite enjoyed the complexity of the political intrigue in this film. Going back to it and watching it in a different way, I actually thought it worked quite well. And I'm going to sneak in number 4, Duel of the Fates by John Williams, because it's just the fucking...
That leads... Your third one leads well into my hate, because I hated the politicalness of it.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I totally get it.
I thought it was terrible.
Yeah.
Liam Neeson. Actually, I'm gonna put it together. Liam Neeson was awful in this film, along with Ewan McGregor. I think he was terrible in this film. Natalie Portman, Jake Lloyd. These are all my number 2. I think they're awful in this film.
Liam Neeson. No, I agree with everything you said there, but not Big Liam. I think Liam Neeson's really good in this movie.
I just picture you looking in the mirror calling yourself Big Liam.
Big Liam. It's time to get to work, Big Liam. Yeah. I think the 2, other than Ian McDiarmid, who we've already mentioned, the 2 standouts in terms of visual design are Darth Maul, but Qui-Gon Jinn's fantastic, and the fact that they killed off 2 of the best characters.
I think
I'm surprised. I'm legitimately surprised to hear that, because I thought Liam Neeson was really great.
No, I don't like the character. I don't like the way it moved. Like everything about Liam Neeson's character, I just wasn't a fan of. I must admit. No.
Fair enough.
And third, is it wrong to say Jar Jar Binks when we already know he was the worst thing in this film?
No, he's number 1 on my list. He has to be. It has to be Jar Jar Binks. And again, like you said, I could name a number of performances in this film, but really, what it comes down to is I think I can even put up with Jake Lloyd if it was just Jake Lloyd, but Jar Jar Binks kind of just makes everything worse. So my number 1 for hate is unquestionably Jar Jar Binks.
Jake Lloyd as well. As you've mentioned him, was he deaf, or did they just say, Jake, we can't hear you? Because every line he said was shouting.
Oh, it's so bad. And some of his lines, yippee, oh, fucking, it's working. Yeah, it's like, oh, shut the fuck up, you little monster.
Even when they're around the dinner table and he goes, you're a Jedi? Like, he's yelling at him. Dude, he sat next to you. The fuck you doing?
It's bad, and like I said, I don't want to shut up, but he's really bad. And again, Ahmed Best, has had to live the rest of his life in the knowledge that everybody obviously hates Jar Jar Binks. And it's not his fault necessarily. Obviously, he was given the direction. He was given that, told to perform in that voice. But there's no getting around. Number 1, unquestionably, Jar Jar Binks. Number 2, and again, I think this kind of sums up a bit more, is the stilted dialogue and the performances, which I think come hand in hand. And 3, the complete opposite view, the fact that they killed off Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. Obviously, they didn't actually kill off Darth Maul, but for the trilogy purposes, they certainly did. And despite you, I actually really like Liam Neeson in this film, so I was a little sad to see him go. Although from a narrative perspective, I understand why they would want to move on to the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin, because that really is the core of the series.
Have you ever seen production stills of Ahmed Best dressed as Jar Jar before they... Yeah. It is insane. He's got basically a baseball cap with Jar Jar's face on it, and he's wearing a black visor around his eyes.
It's nightmare fuel, isn't it?
It really is weird, isn't it? It's like really he's killed Jar Jar, ripped his ears off, and just wearing his head as a hat.
Yeah, as a cap. Oh, my God. Yeah, poor guy. Never mind. Well, again, this is one of those films. There's a bajillion facts, so we'll have to pick and choose, I suppose. But do you want to go first?
I'll go first. These may not be the best ones. They may not even.
That's fine.
But I've just because there is millions of them.
Oh, of course.
I have to draw the line at some point. Liam Neeson was so eager to be in the film that he signed on without having read the script. I argue maybe he should have read the script. But
in this instance, yes, maybe he should have.
During filming, Ewan McGregor made lightsaber noises as he dueled. George Lucas explained many times that the sound effects would be added in by the special effects people later on. Ewan said, "I kept getting carried away." I mean, it goes back. Cool. There was a story of Rocky, wasn't there, as well? Sylvester Stallone, when he was doing Rocky. He was doing the push sounds as he's punching.
Yeah. Well, especially for something like this, you can get it because, again, Ewan McGregor falls into that demographic. He would have grown up with Star Wars, probably loved Star Wars, and then suddenly he's playing Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. And you've got to remember, in 1999, they all just assumed this is going to be the greatest movie of all time. So, yeah, I get it.
I read this and I pissed myself laughing because if you go back and watch it after you've read this, it's definitely true. Ewan McGregor recalled that his performance in the film consisted of walking into rooms and looking up. And it's pretty much every time he walks in, he's looking up.
Just look up. Yeah. You're either looking at Jar Jar Binks or you're looking at Liam Neeson. You're looking at people a lot taller than you all the time.
Qui-Gon's communicator is a redecorated Gillette Sensor XL razor for women.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never see that again. It's one of the few times it's like a Star Trek style communicator, isn't it? Only happens to be a razor for women, of course.
Right, where am I going? Anakin's theme is a musical variation on the Imperial March. Darth Vader's theme from The Empire Strikes Back. So I've kind of stolen a little bit of soundtrack for you there.
Mm-hmm. That's quite all right.
Darth Maul doesn't show up until almost the half-hour mark and only speaks a total of 3 lines, spending all of his 8.5 minutes on screen time, either listening, walking, or standing quietly, or fighting. Maul actually has a very memorable, intense monologue about fear that was used in TV spots, but never actually made it into the final movie. Furthermore, Peter Serafinowicz has stated that in an interview that he actually recorded much more dialogue from Maul that never ended up in the film.
Well, I quite like the fact that he's the kind of, the silent type. He does only have a few lines, but they're pretty impactful for the most part. They're just like, well, he's just this aesthetic thing, isn't he? That's the thing. I think they knew early doors, he looks cool. We've got this great lightsaber battle. Let's not ruin it with any chat. Let's just keep it to let's keep things nice and simple.
So Liam Neeson convinced George Lucas to keep a scene where Qui-Gon puts his hand on Shmi Skywalker's shoulder. Lucas felt this might be out of character for the monk-like Jedi, but Neeson thought there should be an emotional connection between the characters. In an interview with Premiere Magazine, Neeson defended his action, saying it may be Star Wars, but we've got to have something there for the adults. It's literally putting his hand on his shoulder.
Yeah, but I guess the whole thing is that they're not supposed to have, Jedi aren't supposed to have emotional attachment, physical attachment. But like I said, there is something between the two of them, between Shmi and Qui-Gon Jinn. When he comes in, you're just like, oh, I think these two kind of want to get it on together. But there are hints throughout the film, the way that he's going against the Jedi Council, that Qui-Gon Jinn, well, he's hardly a bad guy, but he's a bit of a rogue, So I suspect that maybe he did want to get it on with Shmi Skywalker quite a bit.
According to the Blu-ray commentary, the scene where Padme and Anakin first talk is the one that was used to audition potential Anakin actors. The crew also states that Jake Lloyd did not like filming this particular scene, and it questions how they auditioned so many people, but Jake Lloyd ended up there. But
yeah, it seems odd that they came to that conclusion. Like, no, this is the guy. Quite bizarre.
Yeah. This is interesting. The script explains that the reason Watto is always flying is that he is crippled. If you look closely, you can see that one foot is longer than the other. He also talks out of the side of his mouth because the broken tusk slurs his words.
Oh, that's interesting, because it was only when that last scene with him and Qui-Gon, when he's basically saying, I'm here to collect my winnings, and he was still flying there. I was like, wait, does he just always fly? He's got legs. Isn't it tiring? Shouldn't he just sit down or stand up? But yeah, I never realized that he was disabled.
The Starship Enterprise from Star Trek The Next Generation could be seen briefly flying amongst the traffic, flying around Coruscant.
Gotta check that out, man.
And have I got? Yeah, so Ewan McGregor was cast from a short list of 50 actors, all of whom had to be compared to pictures of young Sir Alec Guinness.
Mm-hmm. That's not the way to go about, I think it's important that it looks like him. I think, he captures that spirit. But like you said, he got there eventually, and I do like Ewan McGregor. So, and I, again, really looking forward to the new TV show.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, not a huge Star Wars fan, but I have seen them all. I'll continue to watch them all because there are things that surprise me.
Yeah, I'd be really interested. If you go back and watch, the rest of the original trilogy now, I'd be especially interested to hear what you think of Revenge of the Sith. Because as I said, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think there's some legitimately brilliant stuff in it. Don't get me wrong, there are one or two pieces of dialogue which are just outrageously bad in that film, but I think it really does hold up, that film. And it looks great. It looks really good.
And finally, George Lucas cast Natalie Portman after seeing her in Leon. Which,
yeah. Well, that's what I
know from. Leon is a fantastic film, so.
It certainly is. I've only got a few, and actually a nod to what you mentioned earlier about Willow and the fact that Ron Howard took over on Solo. Lucas actually wanted Ron Howard to direct this film, but it was like the offer was made without really any script or idea of what he was going to be making. Basically, he just said to Ron Howard, like, do you want to direct Star Wars, the next one? And he turned it down, and Lucas didn't want to direct this film. Like, he even asked Spielberg and Zemeckis, and I think everyone just kept coming back to him saying, no, dude, this is Star Wars, you should direct it. And the fact that marriage, you look back and think, God, what could it have been if they could have got Spielberg or even Ron Howard, and who I know is known as predominantly a safe pair of hands, and we talked about that in the Willow podcast, but he is a good director, and he proved that Solo is a perfectly decent film, considering Solo must have been in quite a mess to basically offload Lord and Miller. Like, there's no way that film was in a good state if at that point of production, like, we've got to get someone new in. And the fact that he put together what I think is a slightly forgettable but pretty enjoyable movie.
Yeah, it's a
film which got totally unfairly shat on.
I've seen it once, but it's a really good ride. I thoroughly enjoyed it, from what I remember. As well, Bryce Dallas Howard, his daughter, is doing so well, because she's directed quite a few of the. She's hot, but she's directed.
How is she his daughter? It's up there with Liv Tyler. Like, wait, how did you come from? I don't get it. How can you be so smoking hot?
She has directed quite a few of like Mandalorian and Boba Fett episodes.
Yeah. Just to be clear, she's also massively talented. But make no mistake, that it's not a sexist thing. She's. I'm saying this comment. She is so attractive. It's ridiculous.
Can I assume then, Bryce Dallas Howard, big Liam like?
Big Liam does like Bryce Dallas Howard. There's no two ways about it. The Amidala costume is inspired by Mongolian royalty and Korean history. Certainly, there's a picture of me. My brother is married to a Korean lady, and I went to a traditional Korean wedding, very much involved. And three of us look like we're dressed like Queen Amidala. It's ridiculous.
Did you cry as much as Keira Knightley? Because apparently she cried every day because it was so uncomfortable.
No, I didn't. In fairness, I only had to wear it for 2 hours, and I only found out I was wearing it as they were putting it on me. Needless to say, they did not have the clogs in my size. And with the hat, the hat officially made me, I think, about 7'2". So that was.
They have enough material for you.
I mean, just about. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But again, one of the other things. The costume design in this film is absolutely fantastic. Visually, this film, the effects hold up, but it is so much of it comes down to that initial visual design, which has come from the imagination of George Lucas. Absolutely fantastic about this film. And that's about it. I mean, I mentioned earlier about the fact that he's not really a people's director, and his other films like American Graffiti and THX 1138, they were shot like documentaries, and he's never been able to quite remove him from that. He's much more of a visionary, as it were, than he is a director, and you can see that in that film for sure. So that's it for facts. Score, we don't need to go into it anymore. We've already mentioned John Williams' fantastic score, certainly one of his best. Legacy. This is an interesting one because, again, we could go on for ages about the legacy, but I think we've really been talking about that while talking about the film, the importance of this film, despite the fact that it doesn't always work. For the longest time, people considered this to be the worst Star Wars film. I actually think this is better than both Rise of Skywalker and Attack of the Clones. And I know you feel differently about Rise of Skywalker. I think Rise of Skywalker is a travesty.
Right, which one is Rise of Skywalker now?
That was the most recent one.
The third one.
Where the Emperor came back and all that.
Okay, yeah. I know. I thought it was terrible as well.
Oh, I thought it was absolutely appalling. Again, the acting isn't as bad or anything like that, but the one thing this film has got, which that film hasn't, is a coherent vision, and that's the reason I hate it so much. And as I said, I actually think Attack of the Clones, with its instead of basically they replaced a pod race with a love story in the middle. It's bad. And I think the other part of its legacy is the fact that this was the most anticipated movie of all time, potentially. Some people might argue that Endgame or whatever it is, the Marvel films have overtaken that, but I don't think that's true, because you get a Marvel film every year. This was what was this release? 17 years after Return of the Jedi, and again off the back of that trailer and all the build-up. Man, the advertising budget for this film wasn't actually that high. They just let word of mouth do it for them. And as I said, so much of it was done by that trailer, which, I'm going to have to watch the trailer again. Don't watch the movie, just watch the trailer.
There was a film based on the, like you said, the build-up to it, wasn't there? With Jay Baruchel. I'm trying to remember what that film was called.
I can't remember what it's called. I know the one you mean, though. But again, it is a story unto itself. Like the expectations... Fanboys, yeah. And you've got to remember, back in 1999, people would queue for hours outside the cinema to get tickets. This was all before, obviously, you could get your tickets online and stuff. So, of course, when you go to BBC or ITV and they're running the news on this, you've got cameramen outside in the middle of the street, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people all queuing to see this film. People one of the big stories for this was that the trailer for this film was, because again, you have to remember, most people in 99 didn't have the internet. So if you wanted to see this trailer,
you had to go
to the cinema. There was 3. It was Meet Joe Black, not Meet Joe Black. What the hell? The one with Brad Pitt where he was death or whatever.
Yeah, Meet Joe Black.
Meet Joe Black. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it was. I thought I'd said Meet Joe Young. I thought I'd mixed it up with the Gorilla movie. So yeah, Meet Joe Black, and there were 2, 3 others, I think.
I'm just making sure that I'm not getting it wrong now. Hang on.
Like I did. Wait, no, I got it right.
No, I got it right. It was wrong. So there was so the trailer for this film was shown at a Freddie Prinze Jr. film called Wing Commander.
That's based on a video game.
That's based on a video game starring Mark Hamill. The video game starring Mark Hamill. The video game is terrible, but people.
The film's worse.
The film is worse. Sorry, people paid to go so they could watch. So it was a box office hit.
Because and so many people didn't even see it.
Nobody watched the film. People left after the trailer.
Yeah, which seems crazy now, but that is legitimately what a lot of people did. They would buy tickets to these films, they'd go in, they'd wait for the Star Wars trailer, watch it, lose their fucking minds, and then leave. It's you can't imagine it. It's unthinkable in 2022, of course, because you can just watch all the trailers online. But back then, that was a massive thing, being able to see the Star Wars trailer. Yeah. It was as much of a cinematic event as the film itself, kind of in video game sense. Remember back in the day when... what the fuck was it? Crackdown was released for the Xbox 360, but it came with a demo disc of Halo 3.
Yeah.
And everybody just bought it to watch Halo. The thing is, that worked out differently because it turned out that Crackdown was actually a really good game. But that was another
I'm
one
not an Xbox guy, so I've never played the Halos or...
Oh, dude, Halo's the best. Anyway, but yeah, as I said, it's got this really unique legacy as being the most anticipated film of all time. And of course, I think a big part of what it's subsequently led on to is the toxic fanboy situation, which comes with being a Star Wars fan nowadays.
And the impact of that film, Fanboys, as well. The build-up for it, the whole toxicity of the fans and stuff. And there's a great scene in there where Seth Rogen is like a pimp, but he's also a Star Wars fan. And he tells people, he shows one of the main characters, I think it's Jay Baruchel. He says, he's going to be big, this character, so I had him tattooed on my back. And it's a full back of Jar Jar Binks. And it's just,
somebody has definitely made that mistake.
Yeah, it is insane. It is just, but have you ever seen it, Fanboys?
I have years and years ago, but I have seen it.
I think if you want to watch a film about Star Wars The Phantom Menace, but don't want to watch Star Wars The Phantom Menace, watch Fanboys. Yeah.
Yeah, well, honestly, I think the legacy of this film is maybe a bit more interesting. And I think that the backlash to stuff like this idea that, I have an idea of what Star Wars should be. And, I wrote a silly post on our website for Hey You Guys recently after rewatching, Rise of the Jedi, is that? Yeah, Rian Johnson's film. Yeah. The Last Jedi, I do apologize. And how that subsequently led to The Rise of Skywalker, a truly terrible film, because they gave in to the toxic fanboys online.
The Last Jedi was terrible as well.
See, I really like The Last Jedi, but I think whatever your case, and I understand some people don't like it, but I think if nothing else, it's an interesting film. And backing down to toxic fan culture, I think is a dangerous thing, but that's besides the point. In terms of video games, there's a whole bunch. So there was an official video game for the movie, which was rubbish. There was Obi-Wan, which was an exclusive for the original Xbox, also rubbish. There was Jedi Power Battles, which was one of the lower key ones, but was actually really fun. And that was released for the PlayStation and the Dreamcast. I actually played on the Dreamcast, which was pretty decent. But the best one was actually, like the movie itself, was the Pod Racer video game, which to this day has still got a fan base. I think it was re-released a few years ago. And in terms of if you said to me, do you want to see a Phantom Menace video game in 2022? What I want to see is a new pod racer game. I want to see Criterion make it. I want it to basically be Burnout, but with pod racers. That's exactly what I want it to be. It's such an easy answer for me. Because that was a good game, but there's a great game to be made there for sure.
For me, reskin Ace Attorney.
That's pretty good. Objection.
Ace Attorney is basically just like an adventure lawyer game randomly, and just reskin that and just like make all the lawyer stuff politics, and you've got what I believe the Phantom Menace was. Boring.
Yeah, well, half the film is very much set in the Senate. And again, just to kind of wrap up, it's a bizarre film. It's a bizarre film of such incredible highs and lows. And I, for one, am really interested to hear what your score is for this film. Out of 5, sir.
It's saved by a couple of decent set pieces, but it's 2, dude. It's 2.
It's hard to argue with that.
Not a huge fan of it. I just, like I said, I had to watch it in 3 sittings because I couldn't keep going. It was a slog. I'm just not a huge fan of it.
No, I get it. You don't have to justify it. A lot of people aren't, dude.
And would I recommend it to others? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I mean, I would recommend going on YouTube and watching the pod race or watching the final lightsaber battle, but other than that, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really tough one. Again, I hate having to say this, but realistically, what this film is to me is a 2.5, which I don't like using at all.
Just do it. Just do it.
No, I mean, if I'm going to round one way, I think I would just about round up to a 3, maybe, because I think there was some really good stuff in there. But even as I'm saying it, the memories of Jake Lloyd and in particular Jar Jar Binks come flooding back. I'm like, man, that is a 1-star movie right there. So my point being is there's some 1-star stuff in this film, legitimate 1-star stuff. But there's some, the good stuff is from a 5-star film. So yeah, I'm going to say 2.5. I'm going to have to fold. This is a 2.5.
Finally folded. He finally relented.
And in terms of whether I'd recommend it to others, not in and of itself, I would never say to anyone, "Oh, you just need to watch The Phantom Menace." That would be insane. Like you could recommend to someone, say, watch A New Hope, and just say, "Oh, if you called it a day there, it would be fine. It's that good a film." If you're gonna watch the Star Wars saga, don't skip this film. If you're going to watch it, because there's, as we mentioned in the podcast, there's some really important stuff here, which has massive consequences to the rest of the saga. So as a completionist, I think if you're going to watch the Star Wars films, you need to watch this. But you've got to take the good with the bad, and there is quite a bit of bad in this film, to say the least. Despite the problem is the good stuff is really good, but there's not enough of it, and the bad stuff is kind of carpet bombed throughout the entire film. Is pretty shit throughout. So a mixed bag to say the least. But so that was a bit of a special for my birthday. As I said, we usually kind of do podcasts based on the 80s and the early 90s, but screw it, it's my birthday. I want to talk about Phantom Menace. I would
just like to say, on behalf of the Hey You Guys podcast, happy 40th, my friend. Happy 40th.
Oh, thank you. And the same to you, of course. So, in case you haven't listened to it...
39, I got another year yet.
Oh, fuck, you have, haven't you? 39, son of a bitch. Well, for his 39th anyway, last week we did Serenity, and needless to say, that is a far better film. There's no twist. That is a 5-star film, no doubt. Spoilerless. But, so we need to move on to what are we doing next week? And it's your choice, dude. So,
I think we're going to go back to... like 80s and 90s. The 80s for me this for next week. I've been trying to think about, because we watched a couple of sci-fi stuff lately. We've watched like Beverly Hills Cop, things like that. So I want to go somewhere a bit different. So I'm going to go vampire, and we're going to go Near Dark. It's a film that we've mentioned a few times on this podcast because we always link it back. And it's got a couple of our favourite actors in there from things like Aliens and Terminator and things like that. So, and
it's lesser known, isn't it? I mean,
it is very lesser known, yeah.
As much as we both love this film, I think there's a reason we did Lost Boys, months and months ago.
Yeah.
It's taken
Lost Boys is a great film. Lost Boys is an absolute classic. It's different compared to this. It is Lost
Very
Boys
different.
is. I don't want to say Lost Boys is the twilight of this, but
no, it's more. No, it's the MTV. Version of this film. Like, there's no two ways about it.
This film is definitely VH1. Near Dark is
100%. Oh, dude, that's written itself. This very much is the VH1 to Lost Boys MTV. No two ways about it. So So, like, dude, honestly, if you guys haven't seen it before, Near Dark is something of a classic. It got swept under the rug to a great extent due to the Lost Boys, but this is a really, really good movie and a great kind of counterpoint to the Lost Boys and what I guess vampire movies were in the 80s. So if you get a chance, do watch it and join us next week. But thanks for sitting through this. Thanks if you have for watching A Phantom Menace. And as always, catch you later. Cheers, guys.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
Cheers. Bye. Oh yeah, and before I forget, because I always forget, here's Rob telling you where you can actually find us.
Yeah, so we're currently on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Hey You Guys 80s or at Hey You Guys 80s. And we're also on email at heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any emails, any recommendations, or any reviews you have. But whilst we're on about that, wherever you get your podcasts, please also smash the subscribe button. Yes, I said smash.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Leave us a review. And leave us some 5-star ratings as well, but make sure they're 5-star ratings.
Yeah. We're not interested in 1-star, 5-star. If it's not going to be 5-star, don't go smashing anything. Just leave your opinion to yourself. 5-star ratings only. But if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next week.